Let's talk about React context. If you have spent enough time with React, you should probably have worked with React context and use it in one of your projects. Its primary use case is to avoid prop drilling. If you have like long, deep component tree to avoid prop drilling, you use React context, but it comes with its own caveats. So the one problem is the re-renders it causes. So for example, if you have an object stored inside the state of your provider, or you are storing an object in your React context, um, any property change on that object will cause re-renders for all the component tree, which is not ideal for modern complex applications. That's why I built this library called textcon that under the hood uses React context, but provides things like selectors where you can select specific state for your component and just select the state that the component actually use. And just I just want to mention that the approach I used for this library is highly inspired by this video by Jack Harrington. So if you want to know how this library works under the hood, uh, I would highly recommend watching this video. I will make sure to put the link in the description of this video. Great video. So let's see what the problems are with React context first. So here is the project. I have created a simple project with Read and React TypeScript, all that stuff. And it has this counter context. So this is the state that I want to store. I want to store an object in my React context and have a function to update it, to update the state for each counter. So this is the default state, which is starting from 0, 0. And then these are just general steps to create context. Just um, provide it the type. This is the type for it. And then create context. Use this from React to create your context. This is like the boilerplate step that you do to create your context. Then the provider, and here is the state that is drilled to all the components or the child components for this provider. So I store default state for it and then provide the state and set state. So all of the children components can directly use this state and then update the state using these set state components. Pretty simple. And then this is my default app component and it renders two components. One is to display the counter 1 or the first counter, and then the other one is just a button that updates the counter and does not have to do anything with the state itself. It doesn't use the state, it just calls the function to update the state. Okay, so let's see the output of this React application. I have opened this in a separate tab, so it's easy to work with, and I can use my tab tool, React tab tool. So this is a pretty standard component with one with this 0 being shown as the value of the counter, and then there is a button to update the counter value. And this is for counter 1, which is this first counter value here, and by default it's 0. And in this case, this is not your typical counter component because it's setting the counter value to a random math value using math.random here. But let's just pretend it's just a counter component because we just want to see the reactivity of the components. Now, if I turn on this highlight updates when component re-render and then use this component as it is, uh, you will see that both of these components are being re-rendered. So even though this is just a reactive, this component just has the reactive state, the other one is also re-renders, which is this button component. And then it gets even more uh, wild when you have more and more components in as your child component. So for example, I want to see the second state, or I want to display the second state, second counter, and then counter 2, and then just update my second counter. Let's have those components rendered here, and then replace that with 2 and 2. Okay, so now I have display components for counter 1 and 2, and then update components that update the state of those counters. So now I have two. Update counter 1. Let me update this to update counter 2. And then, yeah, okay, it updates. So now if I update this component, you see, even though only from these four components, only this value is being uh, changed or updated, but the whole component tree is being re-rendered. And that's what we want to avoid, especially when these components are expensive to render. Okay, first we want to install this library, and to install it, it's pretty simple. Yarn install. Since I already have React in my project already installed, I just want to install this library, which is this yarn add textcon. Okay, let's see how we can build the same this app, the same first counter, second counter app with textcon, and see the results. So import some stuff from textcon. So primarily we just want this create context store, and then const it returns something, but let's see, create context store. And as a first argument, we want to give it the initial state that it wants. So the initial state in this case is going to be the same first counter, which is going to be 0. You don't have to provide the type because it's pretty good at inferring the types. And then second counter, which is 0 by default. And then what it returns is a provider component that you can use to wrap your component tree and then have these values available to all your child components. And then you have some other things. And the primary thing we want at the moment is this use store that gives us access to this state. So, okay, we are ready to use this. Just wrap our components with the provider. Okay, let's see, make sure everything is working. Let's see. Yeah, okay, so everything still works. But now let's have the same component tree as we had in this component. So we have a counter, one display. Let's copy stuff from here. Counter one display, and then counter one control. And we want to use it here. Okay, instead of using from use context or using it like that, we'll go with use store. And now here is the new part. So you might already have used redux, and it has used selector. This hook, this hook works similar to that. So you have your state available to you, and then I can just select the part of the state I want. So I just want to display first counter. I don't care what happens with the other state. I just don't want to re-render this component when that happens. And then it gives you a getter and a setter. So in this case, it gives me a getter, and this is not a function. It gives you the direct access to the value. So I can say first counter, just rename it to first counter, and then right, and then use the same thing. Okay, so here is this. In this component, I don't care about any state. So how I should avoid two renders? Uh, there is another hook that you can use, which is use actions, but that let's just keep that for later. So to avoid re-renders for this button component, all I want to do is just return some static value, which in this case is true or anything static. Just don't return objects like these. Just return 1, 2, or anything static. So true. I'm going to just return true. And then I'm going to use the set function provided by this useStore. So set, and then this set function is used here, and then it same gives you access to the previous value, and then you can spread previous. Right, okay, that's all we want. So now let's render this. Display one, and then counter control. Okay, let's see if everything still works. Right, okay, things are working and it looks similar. So let's see. Okay, so now when I update, firstly, I can see my button component does not re-render. It's just my counter component that is being re-rendered. Actually, let's just do these things side by side. Let's just return this. Just return a fragment, and then inside this fragment, first I want to render this app component from this app. So import context app from /app, and let me render that here so we can see things side by side. So let's see if that okay. So we have it. Let's add a line break here. I just want to have something that differentiates. This is okay. So this part of the state is using where context, and then this is what using textcon. So when I update this number one, you see all of the components are being re-rendered. But when I update this, just this re-rendered. So let's make this the same way, this one. So let's add two more components, and then the same way these are going to become two and two here, and then in this case I want I want the second counter, right? And then in this case I want to update second counter. Okay, now it should look similar to the previous one. Okay, right, but there are differences. So when I update any of this state, both of these components re-render. But when I update this counter one, only counter one re-rendered. And when I update this counter two, only counter two re-rendered. Not even these button re-render. So that is the benefit that you get using textcon library that I have built. Another very useful advantage of textcon library is the actions. So let me just comment this out. We just don't want that comparison anymore. And okay, yeah, now we are starting clean. So as a second argument to this context, we can pass it some functions as actions. So for example, I want to have an action that do this for me. So actions are just functions. So I want to update first counter, and then as a first argument, I get the same getter and setter for this. So let me see if I'm getting my getters. Yeah, okay. So this is my getter, and then this is my set function. And then I can use this set function to set the value. And then I want to accept the payload. Here I don't want to accept any payload because I'm just rendering method or random value. But let's say if I want to accept a payload, I can accept it as actionable payload. But you can take a look at that in the source in the source code or the GitHub repo. It explains it pretty deeply. But for now, let's say I just don't want any. I just want to update this to a math.random value. I don't want any parameter passed, but just be mindful that you can accept arguments the same way you do with Redux toolkit if you have used that. So let's go back to this and then keep our behavior same. So there are two ways you can update this, but let's say previous, and then I just want to show you how you can use getters, and then I want to return this. So previous, and then first counter to math.random plus get dot first counter. So it will just get the previous value of the counter and then add that to this math.random, whatever the value is here. And then just update it. Just use another one to update the second counter. And then second counter. Right. Okay. So to use these actions, what I need to do is just destructure my use actions hook. And then inside this, inside my control components, I don't want to use this anymore. Well, I want actions. And then it should be able to infer all of the actions that we have. And in this case, we have two, which is update first counter and second counter. And now all we need to do is just call these functions. Update first counter on click. Right. Okay, that's all we want. This is super plain than the previously what we are doing. And if you are using or updating this component from like more than one child component, then this is pretty neat. You just have to define the logic in one place and then use those actions. That's why the actions are used. And then inside my control 2, I want the second counter. This, and then all I need to do is replace this with my update second counter function. And that should work the same way it was working before. Let's refresh. Okay. Well, yeah, it is working just fine. So, but now you have these actions, and you can just call these actions from multiple of your child components. And then there are more to the library, which you can just go to this GitHub. I'll make sure to leave all of the links in the description. So you can just go to this and look at the README and then try these out. I have examples with Immer down here. So if you have like large components and you just want to update the state, don't want to like destructure and then copy all of your previous state, which can get pretty messy. So yeah, just make sure to leave comments what you think about it and the problems the library solves. Just use it if you want. And with that in mind, subscribe if you want and like the video. See you until next time. Bye.